LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 11th special Sunday edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mix-Up. A day early, I guess. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, media criticism and political commentary fair use show for you all today. My main topic, as you can see from the video title, is Sunday news shows remember Queen Elizabeth II and September 11th, because that was like the main focus of the 5 Sunday shows from the 5 corporate news outlets. And I'll be talking about those topics when I get to the news summaries, even though I mean, there's news and then there's just like filler. I don't know. I've been watching too much coverage of the death of Queen Elizabeth II, and I've watched 21 years of, or 20 years of September 11th anniversaries, and the news content there is not that high. So I'll also be talking about some other big stories that got coverage. They would have gotten bigger coverage except for those 2 top stories. One is the recent surprising Ukrainian victories, driving back invading Russian forces. Because you remember, Ukraine was like the main topic of the Monday media mix-up, like starting in February, like week after week after week, and then it kind of fell off the focus of the drive-by media, I guess you could call it. And I'll also be talking about former President Donald Trump's ongoing legal problems, because there were several stories about that in the last week. And for my political comedy, I'm actually going to start with that topic, because the topic actually resulted in an actual lawyer joke about Trump's lawyers needing lawyers. This is a clip from MSNBC's The Sunday Show with Jonathan Capehart. He was talking to this New York Times reporter, Luke Broadwater, and you can hear this Trump lawyer joke over in this clip.
Let's talk about some of your own reporting that came out yesterday. Trump's lawyers are now getting their own lawyers. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, I mean, it's been several weeks of bad news for the Trump legal team. You have had several of them receive grand jury subpoenas. Several lawyers connected to Donald Trump have been named as possible or potential targets in criminal investigations. There have been a slew of new ethics complaints filed against Donald Trump's lawyers, just 17 ethics complaints last month alone. And so now some of them are hiring their own attorneys because they're worried about their own legal jeopardy. We reported in the story this morning that Christina Bobb, one of the lawyers who had signed that declaration to the Justice Department saying that they had returned all the classified documents, and that turned out not to be true, that she has now retained her own counsel. So, there's a joke going around, a dark joke among Trump's lawyers, that MAGA actually stands for making attorneys get attorneys.
Yeah, I have seen that. Let's switch gears just a little bit and talk.
So yeah, as Crumpy Cat pointed out in the live comments there, the special Trump lawyer joke is that MAGA stands for making attorneys get attorneys, because that's what happens to Trump's attorneys, and that's going to be an ongoing story. One of the things I'm thinking about transitioning to, if I start doing something different from these Monday media mix-ups after the November midterms, is like covering the criminal prosecution of Donald Trump. I think after the midterms, that's if there's going to be an indictment from the Justice Department, it's probably going to be like in late November or December. That's their like sweet spot to indict him when it's not before the midterms, but it gives them the most time possible before a possible January 2025 Trump administration that takes over the Justice Department and shuts the whole thing down. But anyway, like I said, I'll be talking more about the Trump legal troubles when I get to a few clips on that. Down in the video description, you can see I've written short summaries of all 11 of my clips if you want to know what's coming up. First are going to be the 5 news summaries, from the longest news summary to the shortest. The first one is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, which mostly focused on the reaction to the death of Queen Elizabeth II, what's going on in Great Britain. Though I'm going to have like a secondary news summary from ABC later about the surprising Ukrainian victories against the Russian invaders. That's, if you're looking at the clip list down in the video description, that's clip number 7. But this is clip number 2, the longest news summary from ABC, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Welcome to This Week. We join you this morning from London, where a nation in mourning has welcomed a new king while preparing to say goodbye to its longest reigning monarch. There's the coffin bearing Queen Elizabeth II, the procession departing for Edinburgh a short time ago from Balmoral Castle in Scotland, where she died Thursday. Buckingham Palace has announced 10 days of commemorations for the Queen, culminating in a state funeral to be held at Westminster Abbey next Monday. President Biden has confirmed he will be attending. Yesterday, the Queen's son, King Charles III, was officially proclaimed Britain's new sovereign in an historic ceremony that was televised for the first time. He paid tribute to his mother's 7-decade reign and earlier pledged lifelong service to Britain in his first address as monarch. Members of Parliament also took their oath of allegiance to the new king yesterday, who now faces the difficult task of balancing tradition with progress, his own ideas of the monarchy, and steadying a family rocked by recent upheavals. His sons William and Harry and their wives coming together for the first time since June.
You've got opinion.
This morning, we'll reflect on the Queen's remarkable life, her unparalleled legacy, and the challenges ahead for the new king as the end of the Second Elizabethan era further deepens a period of uncertainty and anxiety for the kingdom Charles now leads. Our coverage begins with Amy Robach in Edinburgh, Maggie Rulli at Balmoral Castle. We'll start with Maggie. Good morning, Maggie.
Hi, good morning, Martha. Yeah, we were standing right here watching as the Queen's coffin made its way down this road, leaving Balmoral Castle for the final time. And just knowing that she'll never be back here in this place that she so loved, often called her favorite, it was emotional. And we saw through the car windows Princess Anne, and the look of pure grief and heartache on her face was a reminder that this moment isn't just about a nation grieving for their queen, but also about a family grieving for their mother, their grandmother, their great-grandmother. Now, as her coffin right now is making its way to Scotland through those backcountry roads, more than 100 miles, stopping in small Scottish towns, we're seeing such an outpouring of love, thousands and thousands of people coming out to line the streets. And Martha, what's been so striking being up here in Balmoral for the last few days is witnessing this special relationship that the royal family has with the community here. And we've spoken with so many that call them their neighbors, say things like, you know, the then Prince Charles walked into the local bakery to buy a loaf of bread, or they would see the Queen driving herself around town, giving the locals a wave. As one woman put it, she said, you know, right now we're not just grieving the death of a queen, we're grieving the death of a neighbor. And I think, Martha, that as we see this outpouring of grief and love today in Scotland, it's really just a glimpse of the outpouring of grief and love we're going to see throughout the entire week to come.
That's true. We will. Thanks, Maggie Rulli. Let's bring in Amy Robach, who's in Edinburgh. And Amy, the Queen's arrival there sets in motion nearly 10.
Okay, and I told you way too much coverage of the death of Queen Elizabeth II. I mean, she's a 96-year-old woman died. That's not really news, but I guess longest reigning monarch in English history dies is sort of news. And I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the monarchy. I've watched The Crown, so I know something about the sacrifices. That's my basis for knowing about the sacrifices people make to be in the royal family, and it seems like like a weird reality show, soap opera, Big Brother, Survivor, Amazing. I don't know what to call it, but I wouldn't want to be a British royal, but I wouldn't want to have a monarchy, and that's one of the reasons that the United States was started to reject monarchies, and they don't even make sense, but there's a weird... I actually almost was going to make the title of my video this week King Charles III, the last monarch in England, because I kind of think maybe he will be. That I don't even understand why people... there's one thing that while I was watching some commentary on this, endless, days and days of, I watch the cable news a lot of the time when I'm doing other things, to fulfill my role as liberal viewer and watching the cable news programs. And there's been endless coverage of the death of Queen Elizabeth II. But one of the things I was thinking about that happens in the UK that we don't have here in the United States is and this happens in other countries that parliamentary systems where they have a head of state who is non-political. I did some studying in Israel because I was born Jewish and I've been to Israel a few times, and I studied the Israeli system where they have a prime minister but also a president who is supposedly this non-political figure who represents the state, kind of like the Queen does in England. And I guess there's some benefit to having someone, especially given the problems we're having here in the United States about election legitimacy. There's always in the UK a queen or a king who can invite the new prime minister to Balmoral and say that they are legitimate if at the end of the election, and that it's a non-partisan figure who can lend legitimacy to the partisan figure who was elected as prime minister. And I don't know, maybe that has some value since we've had such problems here in the United States recently with people respecting the integrity of who gets elected in our elections. But anyway, I'll talk about that more when I get to the Trump legal problem questions. I actually have a clip coming up of Hillary Clinton talking about Trump's problems with his classified information. That's clip number 9. But I want to get to the next news summary now. This is the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos one was that you just watched with Martha Raddatz was more focused on the death of the Queen of England. Other shows sort of split their focus between the death of Queen Elizabeth II and also the 21st anniversary of September 11th. Today is actually the day that only people who live through September 11th are allowed to buy alcohol in the United States. So that's a very special day. But they kind of focused more on September 11th. Well, they had 2 reporters just like ABC did, but the first reporter was Shawn talking about September 11th, and I didn't show the second reporter, Martha McCallum, over in the UK, but I'll talk about the Fox News Sunday news summary a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Today, Americans mark 21 years since the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil killed nearly 3,000 people and countless others in its aftermath. This is a live look at the Pentagon, where later this hour, President Biden will pay tribute to those lost on 9/11. Meanwhile, the country joins Britain in mourning Queen Elizabeth II, who died Thursday at 96. A live look now at Buckingham Palace, where Britons are marking the biggest change to their storied monarchy in 7 decades. In a statement, the White House noting the Queen stood in solidarity with the United States during our darkest days after 9/11, when she poignantly reminded us that grief is the price we pay for love. In a moment, we'll ask U.S. Ambassador to the United Kingdom, Jane Hartley, about the relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. But we begin in team coverage. Martha MacCallum is live in London with more on the end of an era for the world's longest-serving monarch. But first, to Fox News senior correspondent Eric Shawn, live from Lower Manhattan. Hello, Eric.
Good morning, Shannon. It has been 21 years, but it seems as if not one day has gone by. As again we gather here at the former Ground Zero, now the 9/11 Tribute Museum and Memorial, to honor and remember. There is the familiar sights and sounds that we have seen over the last decades, the government officials, the survivors, the first responders, and the family members of the victims honoring those who were killed here by radical Islamic terrorism. There will be, as always, the 4 moments of silence when the 2 jetliners hit both towers and when those 2 gleaming towers crumbled to the ground. There will be the reading of the names of the victims that is ongoing right now. 2,063 people killed by radical Islamic terrorism. Vice President Harris, Attorney General Merrick Garland are here to honor those who died and to remember. Vice President Harris is arrived, we understand, down in Washington. President Biden will be at the Pentagon, as you said, and First Lady Jill Biden will be marking the ceremonies in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, to mark where United Flight 93 crashed. The decades, though, have not diminished our memories or, for many, the pain. We're reminded that the Taliban has taken over the Afghanistan, and also that the Biden administration killed al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri in July, that the threat remains, that the philosophy is still with us. Tonight, the tribute and light will soar into the sky, the 2 gleaming towers of light that evoke the vanished towers will remind us all, not just of what we lost, but the threat that still exists. Shannon.
Eric Shawn reporting from New York. Eric, thank you so much. We turn now to the anchor of the story, Martha MacCallum, live in London around the clock. Good to see you, Martha.
Good to see you, Shannon. Congratulations on your inaugural program. It's wonderful to be with you. I wish you a long and happy tenure in this spot. We are covering this story.
I bet Eric Shawn feels like an asshole for not, congratulating Shannon Bream on being the new host of Fox News Sunday at the beginning of his report after hearing Martha MacCallum. I actually like Martha MacCallum. Shannon Bream, as I've mentioned for the last several weeks, the new host of Fox News Sunday, is pretty much a partisan hack. She blocked me on Twitter many years ago for no reason that I can understand. And I think her coverage is, if you read the book The Loudest Voice in the Room that I have over here by Gabriel Sherman, you know that Fox News was created not to be a news organization, but to be a propaganda arm of the Republican Party, which is, in fact, what it has turned out to be. And Shannon Bream, I can't say she's ruining the journalistic reputation of Fox News Sunday becoming the host, because even though Chris Wallace, the previous host, was a little more journalistic, the host before that, Tony Snow, he was also a partisan hack. So I think she's following in the tradition of Tony Snow as a partisan hack. And I'll show you a clip number 10, where she talks to Senator Tim Scott and totally downplays the danger of Donald Trump to our democracy. But that'll be something to wait for. Clip 10. This was just clip 3. I'll show you Shannon Bream's partisan hack Fox News bias if you wait till clip 10. But I want to finish the other 3 news summaries. CBS and then CNN are both concentrating on both the death of Queen Elizabeth II and the 21st anniversary of September 11th, which I guess is news, and I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch Margaret Brennan's news summary on CBS News' Face the Nation this morning together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. 21 years ago today, Americans united in their grief and in their opposition to extremist forces who attacked the country on September 11th. It is a somber Sunday morning here in the U.S. and in the United Kingdom. We are witnessing a solemn tribute there, with crowds lining the streets to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II as her coffin makes its way from Balmoral Castle, where she passed away on Thursday, to her official home in Edinburgh, Scotland. We'll have a report from London on an extraordinary period of change in the United Kingdom in just a moment, but we want to begin here in the U.S. From Ground Zero in New York to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and here at the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, Americans remembered the nearly 3,000 lives lost on this day 21 years ago. As has become tradition, moments of silence marked each of the devastations of that morning in 2001. 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center towers. The towers collapsed shortly thereafter, a 3rd plane crashing into the Pentagon, and a 4th brought down in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. In a sobering and now familiar ritual, the names of the fallen were read aloud. President Biden laid a wreath at the Pentagon and made remarks a short time ago.
Our intelligence, defense, and counterterrorism professionals in the building behind me and across the government continue their vigilance against terrorist threats that has evolved and spread to new regions of the world. We'll continue to monitor and disrupt those terrorist activities wherever we find them, wherever they exist, and we'll never hesitate to do what's necessary to defend the American people.
For a closer look now at the evolving threats to the homeland, we begin this morning with the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner.
And I actually don't have a clip of Mark Warner from CBS News Face the Nation, although I do have some clips talking about the threat to the United States and what Mark Warner talked about. Like, he talked about both the threat from the classified information stolen by the former President Donald Trump and taken to Mar-a-Lago, and there's no Mark Warner clip, but down in the video description you can see the entire Mark Warner interview by clicking on the link next to Face the Nation, because Face the Nation actually uploads their entire program to their YouTube channel. That's where the link in the video description goes, and they have like their whole program split into clips, including the Mark Warner clip if you want to see that. But this next news summary, it's NBC News Meet the Press, and this is kind of weird. It's kind of like last week where they did like their Labor Day weekend program where it could have been recorded like a month earlier and they didn't talk about any of the news, and it was, their motto is, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Some people have made fun of me for pointing out that is a false statement, because they preempt Meet the Press many Sundays for like sports events. And then last Sunday, I couldn't tell if that program was recorded like a month before the broadcast. This program was all about the Vice President, Kamala Harris, and featured an interview of her that was done on Friday, which was after the death of Queen Elizabeth II. You don't hear the words Queen Elizabeth. They never mentioned the death of Queen Elizabeth II in this entire episode of Meet the Press, even though it was, they recorded the Vice President's interview on Friday, but maybe the rest of the program was on Thursday, or I don't know what's going on with Chuck Todd and Meet the Press, but apparently they're not doing news, they're doing like documentaries, and this was almost like an infomercial for Kamala Harris. But the last clip I'm going to show is Kamala Harris talking about whether we should have confidence in the Supreme Court. That's clip number 11. But here's the NBC News Meet the Press news summary about Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, and the vice presidency. And I've talked many times about how Fox News has its partisan bias, but all the news programs have bias towards who's their exclusive guest. They pretend their exclusive guest is like the most important newsmaker for their news summary. And the best example of that is the news summary from NBC News Meet the Press this morning over here.
And a good Sunday morning. There's been no shortage of unkind things said about the job of Vice President of the United States. And many of those things have been said by vice presidents. The most famous may have come from the first, John Adams. I am Vice President, he said. In this, I am nothing, but I may be everything. The number one job of the Vice President is to be a good number two, to help make progress without making waves. And after 20 months, Kamala Harris is familiar with the position's unique challenges. She was seen as a new symbol of a racially diverse country. But as President Biden's approval ratings fell, so did hers. She's been tasked with some intractable assignments, from enacting national voting reform to solving the immigration crisis at the border. Some of her supporters, and there are quite a few, argue she's being set up to fail on some of those issues. But she's also well positioned to become president someday. Why? 15 vice presidents already have, including our current president, who was a former vice president. Today is September 11th. It was 21 years ago that we were attacked by foreign terrorists. Not quite 20 years after 9/11, the Capitol came under attack from domestic terrorists. With the 9/11 anniversary in mind, I sat down with Vice President Harris on Friday at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. She was there to talk about the space program in general and to speak with some astronauts on the International Space Station. I began by asking the Vice President about how, over 2 decades, our focus has had to shift from foreign terror to the threat from within.
I think it is very dangerous.
And like I said, the last clip I'm going to show is Chuck Todd talking to Vice President Kamala Harris about what she thinks about, or whether she has confidence in the current Supreme Court. So stay tuned for that last newsmaker clip. But I get the feeling Chuck Todd, is not doing news anymore. It's almost like a documentary, like I said. And this was a whole, you can go down in the video description and click on the whole NBC News Meet the Press program and watch it. And it was almost like an infomercial for Kamala Harris. And there was no mention of any news that happened in the last several days. I don't know, is Chuck Todd taking a couple weeks off but trying to pretend he's not? I don't know. You can let me know what you think in the comment section. And then the last news summary is from CNN's State of the Union, and it's on the 2 topics that was the main focus of the Sunday shows. Remembering, like in my title, remembering Queen Elizabeth II, remembering September 11th. Here's Dana Bash starting off CNN's State of the Union. Well, for you all, I've watched over 4 hours of CNN's State of the Union. I was trying to do the Sunday show on Sunday, and one of the reasons I was rushing to the last minute. CNN State of the Union started before 6 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:45 a.m. Eastern Time maybe. Went all the way through the 6 to 7 a.m. time, 7 to 8 a.m., 8 to 9 a.m., and then replayed a couple of the interviews, but with new interviews from 9 to 10. I had to watch over 4 hours of CNN State of the Union. This is the news summary Dana Bash did in the 4th hour, where she said what the State of the Union was. So that's why I recorded their news summary from the 4th hour of State of the Union this morning over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is remembering at home and abroad. We begin in Great Britain, where Queen Elizabeth II just completed the first leg of her final journey through the United Kingdom. She traveled from Balmoral Castle and arrived in Edinburgh a short while ago, with crowds of people paying their respects along the way, honoring the monarch who served them for more than 70 years. An honor guard welcoming the Queen's coffin at the Palace of the Holyrood House, where it will remain overnight. Her children, Princess Anne, Princes Andrew and Edward, on hand for this first stop as the coffin makes its way to London on an eventual path to Westminster Abbey for her funeral 8 days from now. Meantime, here at home, another solemn day to remember. In New York, officials are still reading the names of nearly 3,000 people who lost their lives on 9/11 in that horrific attack 21 years ago today, honoring the victims who died at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in a field in Pennsylvania. Joining me now, former Secretary of State and First Lady Hillary Clinton. She was serving.
And like I said earlier, I will have a Hillary Clinton clip, clip number 9 coming up. We all just watched clip number 6, but Hillary Clinton talking about Trump having classified material at Mar-a-Lago after all those chants of lock her up for much less egregious conduct by Hillary Clinton with her private server, and I'll talk about that when I get to clip number 9. But those are the 5 news summaries, and I think I criticized them along the way, but I don't think either the 21 years after September 11th or a 96-year-old woman in England died, or is that news? Is it news? I mean, longest reigning British monarch has died is kind of a news story, and what changes that will portend for the UK, and will King Charles III be the last monarch of the British Empire? I think that's somewhat likely, but you can let me know what you want to say in the comment section. But they're more, there was a lot of breaking news this week, and one of the stories was in Ukraine, which was a big story for many, many weeks after the Russian invasion back in February. And for my regular viewers, I covered it week after week after week, and then I worried that maybe Putin might win by getting it, the drive-by media wouldn't be covering it every week after, several weeks of making it the main story, and maybe he could win some sort of victory by having it off the main pages. But the United States has sent so much aid, and as well as the rest of NATO and the Europeans, and the Ukrainians have such a great fighting spirit, and the Russian military is like, talk about your paper tigers. They have so many problems that the Ukraine made these huge, surprising victories in the last few days, and I'm going to show you a couple clips on that. First, here's Martha Raddatz introducing a news summary from their reporter Tom Soufi Burridge, talking about the surprising victories of Ukrainian forces. My one criticism here is, why can't they show a map? I've seen a bunch of good maps of the breakthrough of Ukrainian forces, but no good map in the ABC News summary that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Tributes from around the world and a look at the White House flag at half-staff in honor of Queen Elizabeth II, who was following global events right to her last days, including the war in Ukraine, which took a significant turn this weekend after a lightning advance from the Ukrainians liberated a strategically important city in the northeast and could stop Russia's goal of taking eastern Ukraine. Here's ABC's Tom Soufi Burridge now with the latest.
This week, a major breakthrough for Ukraine in the northeast. Its forces advancing quickly through the Russian lines. Wrecked Russian vehicles lining the roads. Russian forces caught off guard, apparently in disarray. Ukrainian troops liberating cities and the Ukrainian flag flying once again. A senior Ukrainian official telling ABC News the operation was thoroughly planned and everything was running to schedule. And overnight, President Zelensky saying his forces have liberated over 700 square miles of territory in just the past 10 days, claiming Russian troops were running away, calling it a good choice. And this, the biggest prize so far. Ukrainian forces entering the strategically important city of Izium. Without Izium, Putin's goal of capturing all of Ukraine's neighbouring eastern Donbass region will be even harder. In newly liberated villages, Ukrainian police digging up bodies. Fresh war crimes investigations now underway. This week, Ukrainian military command saying drones are playing a crucial role in counter-offensives in the east and the south.
We're with a Ukrainian reconnaissance unit just outside Zaporizhia, and these guys' main job is to work out where the Russian positions are so they can call in the strikes.
And this morning, a real sense of crisis at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The last remaining reactor shut down overnight. Shelling in the area, cutting off the last remaining external power supply. So the plant is now only stable because of diesel generators and the risk of a nuclear catastrophe real. The UN's nuclear watchdog, with officials now based at the plant, with this desperate appeal.
A nuclear power plant can never be a pawn of war. Its fate must not be decided by military means.
Yeah, Martha, what's striking about this advance is the speed at which the Ukrainian military has been taking territory. It also seems that the Ukrainians have captured a ton of abandoned Russian military equipment and ammo, another sign that the Russians left in a hurry. This is a protracted war. It probably has a long way to run, but this is a really big moment. Martha?
Tom Soufi Burridge in Ukraine. Thanks to him. Let's bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, who joins us.
So, yeah, that was an interesting report. And I don't know, would that have been the top story if Queen Elizabeth II hadn't died this week? And if it wasn't September 11th on the Sunday of the Sunday morning news shows, the surprising victories in Ukraine? Would that have been the biggest story? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, because it looks like the Ukrainians are on track to not only liberate all the territories or most of the territories taken by Russia since their invasion in February, but even liberating some of the areas that Russia's been holding since like 2014. And that's a point made by the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States here, Oksana Markarova, talking to CBS's Margaret Brennan about this same issue in more detail that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
We are joined now once again by Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. Madam Ambassador, good morning to you. An incredible past few days for your country. I wonder, as you have this progress, if concern is growing that Russia will resort to more brutality to respond to the success Ukraine has had?
Well, our 200 days fall on the September 11, and we know this pain and we feel this pain in Ukraine. We know how is it when terrorists attack you at home. So we always have to keep in mind that Russia still can do a lot of damage, but we don't have any other choice. We will advance. As we said before, we will not surrender, and we will liberate all Ukraine, because this is what we have to do, not only to restore our territorial integrity, but to save all of our people who are under occupation. And we see from the footage from more than 1,200 square miles, which have been liberated during the past literally 8 days, the most fast counter-offensive since the World War II. We see how they are meeting and greeting our armed forces. And we also, unfortunately, see already the signs of the brutal war crimes that have been committed there, no different from what we saw after we liberated the Kiev Oblast. So we have to win, and this counteroffensive shows that we can win, and we are repeating the success that we had in the Kiev Oblast.
Retired General Ben Hodges told our David Martin that Ukraine's military could push Russia back to the borders that existed pre-February 24th, when the invasion happened. And that could happen before the end of the year. Do you agree with that timeline?
Again, this operation was possible because of the resolve of the armed forces, because our commanders, from the president to every commander in the battlefield, are so devoted to the victory, but also because 40 million of Ukrainians are supporting this effort and fighting for our country. But more importantly, because our partners have increased all the support and we're getting more and more of the weapons and equipment that is so needed for that. So of course we would like to liberate all Ukraine as soon as possible to stop the suffering of the people and to restore our sovereignty. But whether it will be possible before the end of the year, we are ready to do it before the end of the year, and hopefully we will have everything we need to do so.
And that last, hopefully we'll have everything we need to do so, is like ask of the Biden administration. That's the next question. Margaret Brennan asks about whether the United States and NATO are giving enough aid to Ukraine so that apparently by the end of 2022 they may have Russia pushed back to the 2014 borders or even beyond. I mean, it's a huge surprise based on, back in January of this year, pretty much the consensus was that Ukraine was going to fall in a couple weeks or even a few days, and that Russia would depose Vladimir Zelensky as the head of the Ukrainian government and impose some sort of Russia-centric government there, and that never happened. And now it looks like by the end of the year, the opposite might happen. And even Vladimir Putin might be in trouble because of this huge failure on his part. Who knows? But anyway, that is the last clip on the Ukraine topic I want to show you, but I have a couple more clips I want to show you on the secondary big news topic, the ongoing Trump legal troubles. And then at the final clip is Kamala Harris talking about whether she has confidence in the Supreme Court and what she thinks about what the rules should be on abortion. That's clip number 11. But this next clip, clip number 9, is Hillary Clinton, but her emails lock her up lady, talking about what she thinks now that Donald Trump is the one who is under investigation for mishandling of classified information, and should we be locking him up? Well, she's actually a little more gracious, doesn't want to jump to conclusions, as Dana Bash points out, but she kind of says Donald Trump should be prosecuted. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
While I have you, I want to ask about the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago. You said this week that you don't want to prejudge because you have been prejudged in your life. I know your infamous emails were investigated, you were cleared, but you've dealt with classified information as former Secretary of State, as a senator. If the Justice Department decides that former President Donald Trump actually committed a crime, do you think he should be treated like any other citizen? Or should the DOJ take into account the potential real-world consequences of indicting a former president and potential 2024 candidate?
I think it's a really hard call, and I cannot predict what the Justice Department will do at the end of its investigation. But I do think the rule of law, holding people accountable, is central to our nation. And both as Secretary of State and as a private citizen, I have answered every question I've ever been asked. I've testified for 11 hours. I've, been involved in anything that was asked of me to try to answer any kind of issue. I think that's the way the system is supposed to work, even if you are, not sure why you're being with the spotlight on you. And therefore, I really believe that at the end of the day, no one is above the law and no one should be escaping accountability if indeed the facts and the evidence point to them having done something that anyone else in our country would be investigated for and maybe even charged.
So it sounds like you're saying that he should be treated like he would if he was Donald J. Trump, somebody who was a civilian, an average citizen, not a former president or potential candidate?
I do, because he's not the president, and we do have some special exceptions for someone actually in the office. So I do think that just like any American, if there is evidence, that evidence should be pursued. But I know it's not an easy call, and so I don't want to inject, my opinion into that difficult calculation because I don't know all the facts. And unlike people who jump to conclusions, I don't want to do that. But if the evidence proves or seems to show that there are charges that should be leveled, then I think the rule of law should apply to anyone.
Madam Secretary, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gave an...
So yeah, that was Hillary Clinton talking about, and you saw how Dana Bash started it with saying, you don't want to jump to conclusions because people jump to conclusions on you, and chanted lock her up. Well, she didn't say the lock her up part, but, and then Hillary Clinton kind of ended with, I don't want to jump to conclusions like people jump to conclusions on me. But in between those two, the beginning and ending don't jump to conclusions postings there, it was more like Donald Trump violated, if there is strong evidence, which there is, he should be indicted. They shouldn't hold off just because he's a former president or anyway. I thought that was an interesting clip from Hillary Clinton. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And then the second clip on the Trump legal troubles I'm going to show you. Well, this is more like a Fox News bias clip. Earlier, I promised I was going to show you Shannon Bream being a partisan hack. And this is the clip because here she asks Senator Tim Scott about, problems the Republican Party is having with what things that Donald Trump has said and done. Because what is it that Donald Trump has said and done? Shannon Bream's not going to tell you. She's just going to vaguely refer to things that, controversial things that Donald Trump has said and done that maybe we should have difficult conversations with him about. But what those things are, is it denying that he lost the election, saying that the FBI is, what did he say? Terrorist organization? I can't remember what he said about the FBI, but anyway, here is Shannon Bream doing a really bad job of being a journalist, instead being a partisan hack by vaguely referring to things Donald Trump has said and done in this supposed cross-examination of Republican Senator Tim Scott over here.
I'll ask you about a passage from your book, America, A Redemption Story.
Yes,
you talk about a difficult conversation you had with then President Trump after the events of Charlottesville and the tragedies there, the comments that he made. You write and say, I've always believed there are moments in life when you must speak out. I knew it was dangerous to take on President Trump. I often tell people if it isn't absolutely necessary, don't do it. But for me, this was a moment of absolute necessity. It's a fascinating story in the book. You talk about being summoned to the White House, going there to talk with the president, and ultimately there was a positive outcome to that conversation. But it begs the question, yes, do Republicans now need to be having difficult conversations with the former president about things that he has said and done in the last couple of years and how it's impacting your ability in things like the midterm elections?
One of the things I try to do in my book, America, A Redemption Story, is to tell both sides of the ledger. And certainly the Charlottesville comments by the former president was something that I believe was very difficult. And so we had a good conversation. I'm not sure that we got to the same side of the issue, but we did get to the same side of the solution, which was helping people who were hurting, helping people in marginalized communities. And today, I think we need to have hard conversations with the American voters about not red or blue solutions, but about American solutions. Let's have hard conversations about the fact that in America, a good education is the closest thing to magic. And that's why 67% of Democrats, 68% of independents, 70% of Hispanics, 74% of African Americans all agree that quality education is necessary for the furtherance of the American dream in the hardest hit communities. If we were to have the tough issues and the tough conversations about the future of America and not the future of Republicans or Democrats, we would actually earn the respect of the American people and let the voters make their own decisions.
Well, it is a time and a place to have important debates and conversations. Senator, thank you for your time. I know your Gamecocks had a hard time yesterday.
And there was something weird about that. They're talking about it's important to have difficult conversations, controversial conversations, and bring them. But Shannon Bream did not have a difficult conversation with Tim Scott because she didn't mention what it was that Trump had said and done that was difficult, that he should stop doing, not election denialism. Even when they were talking about Charlottesville, they didn't talk about how he said that the people fighting fascism were just as bad as the fascists, that there were, fine people on both sides, that whole thing. So that was pretty biased. Fox News, for the inaugural episode of Shannon Bream being the host of Fox News Sunday, I think she set the tone for what we're likely to see. And one thing I like about having partisan hack Shannon Bream as the host of Fox News Sunday is she's actually a lawyer. She covered the Supreme Court for a while, so if during Fox News Sunday she says something about the law that is bogus, I can hold her accountable since, I'm also a lawyer, and I can point out her bogus legal opinions or bogus commentary based on what she should know as a lawyer. But anyway, speaking of lawyers and the law, the final clip I want to show you, I promised you, this is Chuck Todd on Meet the Press this morning, sharing his interview with Kamala Harris, Vice President, his interview last Friday, where he asked her both about whether she has confidence in our partisan Supreme Court, that I don't want to go into all the reasons and the whole stolen seat, the Merrick Garland seat that went to Neil Gorsuch, the Brett Kavanaugh seat that was rushed through with no FBI investigation, even though there are real questions about whether he lied under oath to get on the court. And I've talked about that incessantly based on having lived in the same freshman dorm with Brett Kavanaugh, so I have a lot of information about why he lied about his drinking behavior at Yale and a possible sexual assault against Deborah Ramirez, who was also in our freshman class. And see, I'm already talking about it. And then, of course, the final seat was stolen because after saying that they couldn't fill the seat, they couldn't even have a vote on Merrick Garland for 11 months in the Obama administration, they rushed through Amy Coney Barrett at the last minute. So, yeah, there's a lot of reason. All of that was not discussed as to why the court is illegitimate. But here is why Kamala Harris doesn't have confidence in the Supreme Court, and also her views on abortion that I will talk about with you after we watch that final clip together over here.
Welcome back. Returning to my sit down with Vice President Harris. We talked about the Supreme Court with its now 6-3 conservative majority. In its last term, the court expanded gun rights, limited the government's power to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, and of course, eliminated the right to an abortion. When I asked the Vice President about her views on the court, she had a ready answer. We have some polling that shows confidence in the Supreme Court is at its lowest level that we've measured in over 20 years. How much confidence do you have in the Supreme Court?
I think this is an activist court.
What does that mean?
It means that we had an established right for almost half a century, which is the right of women to make decisions about their own body as an extension of what we have decided to be the privacy rights to which all people are entitled. And this court took that constitutional right away. And we are suffering as a nation because of it. That causes me great concern about the integrity of the court overall, especially as someone who my life was inspired by people like Thurgood Marshall, the work on that court of Earl Warren, to bring a unanimous court to pass Brown v. Board of Education. This is the court that once On one sat Earl Warren and Thurgood Marshall. Sandra Day O'Connor. It's a very different court.
There's a bill in the Senate, Senator Kaine, Senator Collins that are working on that they say would essentially codify what Roe was, protect a right to abortion at 24 weeks. It would include some religious exemptions. If that's the bill that can pass the Senate, you okay with it?
I'd have to read it and see. The details obviously matter.
Some abortion rights groups have not been as high on it as the other bill that didn't get Susan Collins' support. This one should get Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. Is it more important for the Senate to find some Republican votes here?
Ideally, we codify Roe. We put into law a protection for what I believe is a constitutional right for women to make these decisions, and it would be bipartisan. Ideally, yes, it would be bipartisan.
Do you believe the government should put any limit on abortion?
I believe government should not be telling women what to do with their bodies. I believe government should not be telling women how to plan their families. I believe government should not be criminalizing healthcare providers. I believe government should not be saying no exception for rape or incest. As a prosecutor, former prosecutor who specialized in child sexual assault cases, understanding the violence that occurs against women and children, and then to further subject them to those kind of inhumane conditions. That's what I believe.
Final topic here, since we're here in town.
I don't know. I've never been a big fan of Vice President Kamala Harris. She was a district attorney in San Francisco, and then the Attorney General of California here when, I worked as an ACLU activist, and I didn't think she was all that progressive. She was too pro-cop, too pro-prosecutor, because she was a former prosecutor, and I have never been a big fan of hers, and I thought Stacey Abrams, in clips I've shown in the last several weeks, did a lot better job of explaining why you can't put legal strictures on a woman's ability to choose an abortion anywhere up until the 9th month, because that has to be something determined by medical necessity, what a woman decides with her doctor. And there actually are legal strictures on doctors to not perform procedures that aren't required by medical necessity. And anyway, that I think she didn't do a great job of explaining that. Her lack of confidence in the Supreme Court, you can let me know what you think. But like I said, not a big fan of Kamala Harris. We'll see whether she ends up being a presidential candidate in 2024 or 2028, but that's way beyond the scope of what we're talking about now. And anyway, I hope you all appreciated the time and effort I put into putting up this special Sunday version of my LiberalViewer media Monday media mix-up. I will be coming back next Monday, and Monday, September 19th, and then the Mondays through the November midterms. I decided to do the show early this week because tomorrow I have a tooth extraction scheduled under IV sedation at 2 p.m. and hopefully that will go okay, and I'll be back Monday, September 19th on the regular time, and I can talk more about my major dental problems, and I have to get orthodonture and implant. I'm losing my 4th molar, and I'm losing chewing surface, and all these expenses and procedures coming up in the next couple years so that I can just maintain my ability to chew food. But also I saw kind of in that same area, a Lulu girl was saying, gave me a super chat contribution, waiting patiently for the new pets. Well, we actually had a flooring for an estimate to replace the pet damaged flooring that was $9,000 this week. That was way too much. We have to rethink how we're going to replace the pet damaged flooring before we get new pets. And also we have to budget in the fact that I have to pay for orthodonture and multiple implants in the next couple years. And anyway, it's just a big problem I have to work through. But hopefully there will be new pets after we figure out the flooring problem, and hopefully I will make it through my oral surgery tomorrow and be back Monday, September 19th for the regular Monday Media Mix-Up. And I hope you enjoyed the time and effort I put into this special Sunday show and all my media mix-ups. And anyway, until I'm back for the next one, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.